in hand embroidery, French knots are used anytime you want a little dot or a little ball. But a lot of people struggle with French knots. So if there are French knots in your embroidery pattern and you would rather do a different stitch, here are some suggestions for what you can use. Welcome to Epida Studio. My name is Elizabeth and I help you make beautiful things with quilting, pojagi, and embroidery. So if you are trying to avoid French knots in your embroidery project, here are a couple of alternatives. The first alternative for a French knot is just a little straight stitch. You can make these any size you want, but if you do just a little straight stitch, that can substitute for a French knot. You can feel free to use more strands of thread or a thicker thread to get an even bigger spot than that. The second alternative is to use a little cross stitch. So cross stitch is just made of two straight stitches that are worked perpendicular to each other. So this stitch you're seeing, it gives a little bit more shape, but it's still quick and easy to do. Then the third option is to use a star or a double cross stitch. So this involves having a cross stitch, just the same as the first one that I did, and then coming back and doing a rotated cross stitch. So it's doing an X and then like a plus sign over top of it. And this gives you even more of a round shape and even more texture to it because there's a lot of layers of thread. So it is coming up off the surface of the fabric more. But sometimes this can be difficult to stitch, especially if you want a really small one, just because it goes through the fabric so many times. So in the same place where a French knot would pierce the fabric 2 times, this pierces the fabric 8 times. So depending on what you're working with, that it might be a great option or it might be a little bit more challenging. And then the last option to substitute for a French knot is a single chain or a detached chain, or sometimes called a lazy daisy. And this one probably looks the most like a French knot. And you can adjust the spacing and adjust the tension. So in this one, I've left the tension a little bit loose so it stays open. So it's a bit more rounded. You can do them even smaller than that. And if you struggle with doing this in this method, you can also do it with the stab method. Just stab in and hold your thumb onto the edge of the thread so that you have a loop there. And then bring your needle up and pull it through the loop. And then adjust your tension. So you can see here it's loose, so it's more rounded. Or if I pull it tight, it'll be closed, but it'll be skinnier. So you can play around with the tension to get the size you want. So a single chain is another good alternative. So would you use any of these stitches to replace a French knot? Or would you use something else? Drop a comment below. I would love to hear what you would use. And just remember, if you're doing an embroidery project and you're struggling with one of the stitches that's in the project, you can always replace it with a different stitch. For embroidery stitch tutorials, patterns, and inspiration, check out my website, epidastudio.com.